Tov, good morning. Today is Friday, January 12th, Erev Shabbat, Parshat Vaera. In the 19th century, there were experiments done by German scientists trying to examine how frogs would behave in hot water, being placed into water that was hot, placed into water that was being heated, and there was some very different results that came from this, but one that we perhaps are most familiar with is the ones that have proven that if you throw a frog into boiling water, then they will either jump out, or in reality, we know later on they might just die. And if you place them in slowly heated water, so some Friedrich Goltz was one of them, showed that that intact frogs will attempt to escape, but others, Heinzmann and Fratcher, in their experiments, showed that if you do it slowly enough, they won't try to escape, and they'll eventually die in the boiling water. I was thinking about this teaching, or these experiments, which later on, scientists have tried to say that it's not true. Certainly, the 20th century scientists have said it's all not true at all. And part of the problem is that we don't do these experiments because it seems animal torture. We don't generally carry such things out anymore. But nonetheless, I was just thinking about it in the context of a midrash. Midrash is actually commenting on the verse in the end of chapter 7, where the second plague of Tzfardeia is introduced. V'sharat hayor tzfardeim, that the river will swarm with frogs. Va'alu va'uvetecha v'chadar mishkavacha v'amitatecha, and they will emerge from the river and other water sources, and they'll come into your houses, and into your sleeping quarters, and onto your beds. Vaera badecha, and into the house of your servants. Uva amecha, and amongst your people. Uva tanurecha v'misharotecha. That's the last line, which is so unusual. And into your ovens, and into your kneading bowls. So frogs are going to be ubiquitous, if one word to use. They'll be everywhere. They'll even be in your ovens and in your mixing bowls. And the midrash, tries to imagine a woman who's cooking or baking, and the fact that when she would be kneading her dough or heating the oven, the frogs would come in and settle in the dough, eat the dough, and then go into the oven and cool the oven somehow by their bringing down the temperature for a little bit from their body temperature, was lower the oven, and cling to the bread. But it's a mess. And then the Midrash goes on to describe that also the Hanani, Mishael, Azariah, learned from the frogs. Now, the other ones were told later on, enter the fiery furnace, and Hashem protected them. So the frogs here enter the fiery furnace, the hot ovens, and Hashem protected them. So do they enter the ovens when they're already hot? They enter the oven, as it was being heated, and it wasn't yet hot enough. So that's where I come back to these experiments. But recognize that, whether the experiments are actually true or not, that's the metaphor that's drawn from it is always true. Namely, that human beings tend to tolerate small changes that will eventually lead to drastic changes, often to their detriment. That if they would have, been put up in front of this a drastic change of harsh treatment or the like, that they would have fought it. But if it comes in small little increments, that they tolerate it until the temperature rises and they meet their demise. So, in the context of the story, maybe one could suggest, in this, as we read the Midrash, that what the purpose of the plague was to help explain, on the one hand, what we went through. We in Mitzrayim went through the slow changes that happened from being welcomed guests and family of the viceroy of Egypt to enslaved enemies, who indeed were whose lives were at risk all the time. So that the world should understand how it works, and the Egyptians should be punished for the way they brought that about. So now they're the ones who are going to experience what it's like to by this message, through the experience of the frogs, and be taught the lesson about how terrible it was what they did to us. At the same time, as we read this story, we are mindful. We think about that lesson indeed, and at all times, to keep our eyes open and our antennae up for that which really does pose a radical danger to us, whether to us as Jews or to us as Americans, individuals who would do us all harm, and to recognize the ways in which we let this pass and this pass and this pass and this pass, and before you know it, we are really facing existential crises, and to be able to stop ourselves and say, we dare not fall into that trap. We dare not be the frog in the beaker with the slowly rising temperature. But if we recognize where the dangers are, to be part of the process, part of the force which says no, no, now we say no. Before things happen that will not be good for any of us. That's just a reminder to us that perhaps this Sfardea plague puts before us in every generation, even to this day. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom.